Government is set to appoint an independent inquiry led by a retired judge to probe allegations made by the US ambassador to South Africa that SA supplied weapons to Russia. Now, this comes after the US says it's convinced that South Africa has supplied arms to Russia through a Russian ship that docked at the Simonstown naval base in Cape Town in December last year. The US ambassador to South Africa, Reuben Brigety, says the US government is taking the matter seriously. Brigety was briefing the media yesterday. So let's unpack these developments with a senior researcher at the South African Institute of International Affairs, Gustavo de Carvalho. Gustavo, thank you. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Good. Thank you very much. I'm glad that we've got you there. So the US says it's convinced that South Africa supplied arms to Russia. What are the implications of something like this?
Thank you very much. And there are certainly many implications for South Africa at this particular stage. I think what we see right now is that the cards are on the table. South Africa has been sitting on the fence for around a year and a half. And the idea of South Africa being on a line has been questioned by many at this particular stage, and especially with many of the actions, including with the docking of Lady R in December, but also with the visit of Thandi Modise to Moscow to a military conference last year. And the most notorious of them until now was the military exercise. So what we should be concerned about is to see how the relationship between South Africa and other partners apart from Russia and its own ability of actually navigating in a situation where it can have really dire implications for us in the future.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, when you talk about the future, I mean, Brigety was also saying at this stage, it's not clear whether South Africa's Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, that's AGOA membership, will be renewed when it's up for renewal in 2025. So these are the sort of silent threats that are out and about. I mean, can we read this into being that the US has basically started to institute sanctions against South Africa?
Absolutely, there is a risk to South Africa going forward. I think AGOA is one of the most important trading mechanisms that South Africa used to export, whether it's through chemicals, whether it's through a number of really important industries for the country. And it will be a very difficult position that the South African government has put itself in a way, trying to find a balance between its stated friendship with Russia, but also a really important role that the West and the US in particular has. So the negotiations around AGOA will play a very important role on that. And for us also seeing what other mechanisms and what other countries will do, and especially if the allegations are confirmed by the South African government or by evidence provided by the US Embassy.
The statement that South Africa has supplied arms comes after a trip by a delegation of South African officials, I think it was led by Sidney Mufamadi, who sought to ensure that South Africa did not fall foul of the AGOA Act. Are South Africa and the US entering an escalated period with fraught uncertainty?
Yes, and I think the short question on that would be yes. South Africa and the US have had positive from a trade point of view, but a tricky political engagement in the last 10 years or so. And I think with the President Trump in the US, the relationship became very fractured, especially with some of his allegations and lack of interest towards the African continent. What we do see now is that the United States has been very publicly frustrated with South Africa sitting on the fence when it comes to the situation in Ukraine. But now if South Africa does confirm that it has supplied arms to Russia, it put us in a completely different ballgame. And then the damage control that the government will have to do is quite vast, not only to the US, but also other American partners. And I think in particularly the European Union, that as a collective place the most important trading partner for South Africa in terms of investments and so on. So we are facing some really turbulent times ahead, which is important for us to really be cautious on which next steps we're going to be taking forward.
Yeah, certainly. And also the reaction from the president last night saying he's going to implement an inquiry into this. The president saying he's not aware of this. I mean, this is months ago that the allegations of the Lady R has been there and been spoken about. The reaction by the president, where does this fit into all of it? And how do you think the Americans will take to how the president has reacted and in terms of not really knowing what's going on?
I think for what he gives South Africa right now, if in the most simple terms, is that it buys South African time. Whether the president knew or didn't knew, I think there is much deeper issues in there. For the fact that the U.S. has very publicly stated this. We had a visit from a senior U.S. official to South Africa this week, especially when it comes to issues to arms control, which seems that both were somehow interlinked. What it does provide South Africa and the U.S. is the fact that the cards are on the table. It's very clear now that there is a problem in the relationship. And right now, I think the biggest expectation is, I think, more than the Commission of Inquiry, is how the South African government will be navigating a period where the relationships with the West are becoming more fractured than ever.
All right, let's leave it there for this morning. But thank you for talking to us. That was Gustavo de Carvalho. And he was, of course, talking to us about all of the issues around the U.S. statement that is convinced South Africa has supplied arms to Russia. And, of course, Gustavo is a researcher at the South African Institute of International Affairs.